Well, good evening and welcome to our Wednesday night Bible study. We're so glad you could be with us. Tonight we're going to continue the series that we've been doing for the last 2 weeks, talking about other messiahs. We've been discussing some of those theories that are out there about other religions that you may not have even heard of, but people have written books about and trying to claim that that Jesus is just a copy of a pagan religion, and that a lot of the details concerning Jesus' life is actually, it already happened, 100, 200, 300 years before him, and it's all the same. Last week we talked about Mithra and the religion of Mithraism, and a lot of the details that people talk about today about Mithra are the exact same as Jesus. But what we looked at and what we found out last week, those details came later. Actually, none of that stuff did come before Christ. Actually, there was Jesus and there was Christianity, and then later on, all of this myth surrounding this guy Mithra started to evolve and change to look more like Jesus. And the problem is that scholars were twisting things. They weren't really citing things very well, and they created an entirely new Messiah figure out of something that was never there to begin with. Well, tonight we're going to continue on, and we're talking about another Messiah, so to speak, whose name was Attis. Attis was a Phrygo-Roman god, and I'll just skip ahead all the stuff and give you the conclusion right now. It's the exact same thing as with Mithraism. There is no established text, right? If you remember what we said last week, Mithraism doesn't have their own Bible, so to speak. There is no religious text. They were a secret sect. No one really knows what was going on at the time. People had to write stuff later. We don't have anything from them. Well, the same thing with Attis. There is no established text. There are no Attis-related scriptures. There's no way for us to know exactly what the worshippers of Attis actually believed at the time that they were worshiping him. We do have a little bit more information on Attis than we did with Mithra, but again, there is more speculation going on than actual concrete evidence. So why do people think that Attis is like Jesus? Well, if we go to the internet again, which can't lie, right? It's always right. Attis was born on December 25th. Seems like every Messiah is born on December 25th, to a virgin. Some say her name was Nana, while others say her name was Sybil. He was considered the Savior who was slain for the salvation of mankind. His body, as bread, was eaten by his worshippers. He was considered both the divine Son and the Father. On Black Friday, he was crucified on a tree from which his holy blood ran down to redeem the earth. He descended into the underworld and was resurrected 3 days later. The priests are supposed to have found Attis' grave empty. Once again, eerily similar to Jesus. All of a sudden we're hearing those things and we're like, wow, that's the same thing. All of that stuff happened with Jesus. But let's go to what is actually written about Attis. The first mention of Attis comes from the writing of the Greek historian Herodotus. According to him, Attis was a shepherd from Phrygia and the son of a king, Croesus of Lydia. Croesus had a bad dream, and this bad dream was that his son was killed with an iron spear. And because of this, he refused to let his son Attis go out on a boar hunt until Attis finally convinced his dad it would be okay. So now Croesus, he decides, well, all right, I'm going to let him go, but I want to make sure my son's okay. I want to really make sure. So he hires this guy named Adriastus, that's how you pronounce it, I think, Adriastus, to guard his son on the hunt. And then, unfortunate irony, a boar appears. There it is, and Adriastus, the one who was supposed to be protecting his son, throws his spear at the boar, misses, and of course, it hits Attis and kills him. This is the story of Attis. This is what happened before Jesus came to earth. People talk about Attis the Messiah, all of that stuff that happened with Attis, and it all happened before Jesus. What I just told you, that is the story that actually came before the time of Jesus. As one Christian writer put, quote, "Where's the beef? How do the copycatters think this relates to Christ?" It doesn't. It doesn't relate to Christ at all. The original story of Addis had nothing to do with Christ. None of the similarities actually started appearing until well after the time of Jesus. There were originally only a few scholars who wrote about Addis, about 5 or 6, and none of them even hint that Christianity stole anything from Addis worshippers. All of them say the opposite. A.T. Fear, he wrote an essay devoted to this subject, and he says, quote, "The Addis cult did modify itself in significant ways with the passing of years, and based on dated evidence, seem to have been provoked by a need to respond to the challenge of Christianity." He's saying Addis had to compete with Christianity, so they changed and made Addis like Jesus. Vermasserin, another Addis scholar, he says, quote, "There was a tendency to add more and more complicated theories to the Phrygian cult in the course of time." Gasparo, yet another scholar, he says that, quote, "The sources show an evolution in the Addis cult in response to Christianity." So how is it possible that when all evidence shows that the worship of Addis changed and started copying Christianity, there is now the belief that it's the exact opposite, that Christianity changed to follow Addis? Well, it's because modern day authors have caused people to think this using unethical methods. Two authors that do a whole lot of Jesus conspiracy writing, they go by the name of Freak and Gandhi. They use previous authors' research, right? So they go to those other people and they say, "Hey, look at the similarities. Look at the things that are common between Jesus and Addis," but they don't report the conclusions. They don't say, "Hey, these other scholars conclude that Addis changed to reflect Christianity." They don't say that Addis was a copy of Christ. Instead, they use the research to show their similarities, and then they say that Addis was older, therefore Christianity must have copied it, not bothering to mention that the older version of Addis had nothing to do with Christianity. It wasn't even close. They also take some serious liberties with some of the stories. Let's look at the claim that Addis was resurrected after 3 days. Right? So these Jesus conspiracy people, they say Addis, the story about him clearly shows that he was resurrected in 3 days. It's just like Jesus. In one version of the story, after Addis is dead, Agdistus asks Zeus to resuscitate him. And Zeus, he's in a very playful mood. And so what he does in resuscitating him is he causes Addis' body to remain uncorrupted. His hair continues to grow, and his little finger moves continuously. That's it. Zeus is being a very facetious god, and he's saying, there you go, he's resuscitated, even though he can't do anything other than have his hair grow and his pinky move. It's not a very good resurrection in my mind. If you don't like that version, try version 2. After he's dead, flowers grow out of the ground and he turns into a pine tree. That one doesn't really sound like a very good resurrection either. Let's try version 3. The king finds out about his death and he makes sure that the body is never found. That's what's being passed off as resurrection. And as far as Addis being crucified on a tree, the story says that Addis died under a tree. So what we have here are conspiracy theorists writing these books saying that Addis came first and Jesus and everything we know about Jesus is actually a copy of the story about Addis. Really, Addis, he was resurrected after 3 days and he died and was crucified on a tree. No, not at all. That's not the story. You just totally twisted the story and made up this conspiracy. In modern day Jesus conspiracy stories, dying under a tree and having your dad hide the body is apparently the same thing as being crucified for the sins of the world and being raised from the dead 3 days later. That's what they're passing off as the same thing. I could go through all the Messiah comparisons point by point and show how it was either changed by Attis worshippers after Christianity or changed by Jesus conspiracy people through deceptive means just here in the past 20 to 30 years. If anybody tries to tell you that Christianity stole the Messiah story from Mithra or from Attis, that is simply not true. It's not even close to being true. Both of them were changed to resemble Christianity after Jesus. And a lot of those changes, a lot of what you'll find about, hey, look how similar they are, came in the 20th century. But they're now being pitched as coming before Jesus. As I was researching all of this, the biggest disappointment for me was the lack of text regarding either of these pagan religions. Last week I quoted from a guy named Randy, and I'll quote him again. He said, "Please don't believe a religion just because it is commonly accepted without being researched." You know what? He's exactly right. Don't believe it just because someone's saying it. Research it first. With Mithra and Attis, there's nothing to research. I may not agree with Islam, but at least I've got a text there. At least I've got the Quran to read. I might not agree with Buddhism or Hinduism, but at least I've got something written down I can refer to, I can compare to. Now I can start researching it and thinking critically about it and breaking it down. A Mormon can say, well, the Book of Mormon says. And I can say, yeah, but the Bible says, and we can have an honest debate. We can go back and forth. No such thing exists for Mithra or for Attis. And yet, these are the top two names being thrown around to say that Jesus is nothing more than a copy of a pagan religion. And people are buying into the deception. People are actually saying, whoa, I can't believe this is true. I can't believe in Jesus and Christianity because now I've seen the light. It's just a copy. No, it's not. Next week, we're going to conclude this series, and we're going to look at the final religion, which is Zoroastrianism. And this one's a little bit different, because unlike Mithra and Attis, there is a book for Zoroastrianism. It's called the Avesta, and Zoroastrianism has fewer similarities to Christianity, but there is much more to research, and the similarities that do exist, they're not simply modern writers making stuff up. It's not people twisting things around. And while you might not have heard of it, Zoroastrianism is an old and well-established religion, and it is still being practiced even today. Today, many of them are called Parsis, and estimates range from 150,000 to 500,000 people who follow this religion. They're located primarily in India and Iran, but we're going to dive into that more next week. So I hope, again, that this has given you some insight, helped you to think about some of these things. And if someone approaches you with this idea that Jesus is just a copy from pagan religions or Christianity is just taking bits and pieces from other places, I hope these lessons are helping you to dispel that myth. It is absolutely not true at all. I hope all of you have a good week. I hope all of you stay safe, and we'll see you on Sunday. Bye.